In the 17th year of the Republic, the searing pain dragged me back to life. Then I heard a voice clearly from behind the screen. I, Julian Sterling, have come today to repay a debt. I asked for Evelyn Vance's hand in marriage. It was exactly like the scene from my past life. But this time, things were different. Reborn, I knew how vicious Julian was behind that righteous facade. 2 months earlier, Abbot Solon had declared that young Commander Julian Sterling of Everpeace Town wouldn't live past the age of 20. Soon after, I rescued him, gravely wounded in the ruins. The abbot then said he should marry his savior, for that was the only way to survive his fatal trial. So Julian came to the Vance family to propose, but not to me. My sister, Evelyn's voice rang out. I watched her through the screen. She looked utterly bashful. It was nothing, really. My parents, who knew the truth, stood nearby with fawning smiles. Oh, Evelyn, you're still so modest. Marrying the young commander is clearly your fate. Even Abbot Solon said so. Exactly, exactly. What a handsome couple. A match made in heaven, huh? They knew perfectly well. I pulled my thoughts back to the present. All that remained in my eyes was searing pain and hate. It had been the same in my past life. But back then, I boldly stepped forward because I believed he was my destined match. I loved Julian Sterling, too. But after Julian and I married, Evelyn slandered me as a shameless social climber. Julian locked me in a side residence and burned me alive. Laughter rose and fell in the front hall, yet I laughed, almost delirious. The debts from my past life, I'd settle them one by one. Evelyn craved empty fame, so I'd raise her all the way to the heavens. Julian cared about his reputation, so I'd tear his dignity apart myself. The engagement between Julian and Evelyn spread through every corner of North Capital. Before half a day had passed, I sat on a daybed in the rear courtyard, my fingers tracing the wood grain on my medicine chest. I listened to the commotion from the front courtyard. I didn't even look up. It was Madame Sterling. The old lady from a military family had a fearsome presence. She brought a crowd of servants, and nearly wore down the Vance family's threshold. She didn't even spare Evelyn a glance. She opened with a sharp accusation. Evelyn had been frail since childhood. A fortune teller said her fate clashed with Julian's. They were a cursed match. Is your Vance family trying to get my only grandson killed? My parents went deathly pale with fear. They hunched over, nodding and scrambling to explain. They praised Evelyn as the finest girl under heaven and on earth. They claimed her frail health was a blessing, and talk of destiny was utter nonsense. From behind the window lattice, I watched their disgrace unfold. Sure enough, they soon ran out of excuses. Father's eyes suddenly shifted. He swiftly turned the conversation to me. His sycophantic voice made me sick. Madame Sterling doesn't know this, but we have another daughter, Clara Vance. She was an orphan we adopted years ago. She was clumsy from childhood and knew nothing about medicine. She had no connection to Julian whatsoever. Mother quickly chimed in, afraid she hadn't made it clear enough. That's right. That's right. Clara is nothing but an outsider. How could she compare to Evelyn's devotion? Our family only ever wanted to arrange a marriage between Evelyn and the young commander. Her words were a dull knife, gently slicing across my heart. In my former life, I would have rushed out and hysterically demanded to know why they were slandering me. But now, I merely lowered my eyes with the faintest, coldest curve of my lips. An adopted orphan who knew no medicine. Good. Very good. They had severed every tie between me, the Vance family, and Julian. That was exactly what I wanted. After Madame Sterling heard this, she gave a cold snort. She had clearly believed their lies. She scolded them a few more times, then left with her people. The sycophantic voices in the hall faded. My parents began quietly discussing how to make Evelyn's wedding grand and win the Sterling family's favor. I returned to my room and locked away my medical kit. They thought clinging to the Sterlings would let them rise to power. They didn't know. It was merely their first step into hell. After Madame Sterling left, a heavy silence lingered in the Vance foyer. My parents soothed Evelyn and sent lavish gifts to the Sterling estate. Everyone in the house was running ragged. No one spared a thought for me, their adopted orphan. As usual, I stayed in the back courtyard. I polished my family's heirloom gold needles. My fingertips touched the cold, genuine metal. Only then did my heart finally settle. Less than 2 days later, Julian came in person. He brought very few men. He was dressed in a crisp uniform. His eyes held a warlord's arrogance. The moment she sat down, she got to the point. I heard Miss Sue was here too. I remember my savior had a scar on their hand. Bring her out. When I was led into the front hall, I saw Evelyn clutching Julian's sleeve, her eyes slightly red. Before I could say a word, she raised her hand first, revealing a faint cut on her wrist. Her voice was soft, almost tearful. Julian was in such a hurry when he saved you. He cut his hand on some rubble. It left a little scar. Don't blame me for keeping it from you. The scar was so faint, you could barely see it. It was clearly cut there on purpose. I lowered my eyes, my fingers absently brushing my palm. The real scar was at the base of my left thumb. On that night of war in my past life, I pulled him from the rubble, and was cut by a jagged shard of stone, so deeply, I could see the bone. Later, as I brewed his medicine and changed his dressings, the wound kept splitting open until it left an ugly scar. Evelyn didn't have that scar. My parents chimed in, going on about how much Evelyn suffered to save Julian, while hinting that I was beneath them, knew nothing about medicine, and could never have saved anyone. Julian's gaze fell on me, scrutinizing and searching. I met his eyes, my face utterly blank. Just like in my past life, with Evelyn looking so delicate, he must have had his doubts. But between Evelyn and me, he would always rather believe the prettier one, Evelyn, was the woman he should marry. For a fleeting moment, I had the strange feeling that Julian might have been reborn too. Maybe he came to see me lose control, crying and screaming as I exposed Evelyn's lies, just as I had in my past life. But I wouldn't do that now. I simply stood there, watching Evelyn's pathetic performance, and my parents' fawning faces, watching Julian fall for their lies. A faint, icy laugh crossed my heart. Good. The more pleased they were now, the harder they would fall later. When Julian saw me remain silent, he frowned. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Then he suddenly said, "I want to see your hand myself." I was somewhat surprised. Soon enough, Evelyn was set on taking my place and marrying into wealth, but young Commander Julian Sterling looked at her with icy eyes. I was stunned, but Evelyn could only fall silent. The image she'd worked so hard to maintain had always been one of quiet grace, never fighting for attention, never making a sound. But now, with nowhere left to turn, I slowly extended my left hand. There was, in fact, a gruesome scar at the base of my thumb. As it happened, I had a scar on my hand too. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. However, I got this saving my sister more than a decade ago. After that, I became afraid of blood. I couldn't even touch medicinal herbs. I knew nothing about medicine. Julian's pupils suddenly contracted. The arrogance on his face slowly shattered. He stared intently at that scar, then looked at the faint, almost invisible scratch on Evelyn's wrist. His face went pale, then flushed. Madame Sterling, who had come with him, snorted. The disgust in her eyes nearly spilled over. She had never believed Evelyn, and now, by comparison, she was certain every word Evelyn spoke was a lie. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Madame Sterling left them with that remark and swept away with her entourage. The foyer fell deathly silent. Father and mother went deathly pale. Evelyn trembled with rage, but didn't dare make a scene. I slowly withdrew my hand. My fingertips were ice cold. Fortunately, Julian remained determined to be with the prettier Evelyn. To be born into the same family as your sister Evelyn, and to have saved her when you were children, that's quite a blessing. What a blessing indeed. Hearing that, Evelyn only pushed her luck further. She started playing the victim. Seeing her like that, father and mother felt even more heartbroken. They rushed to comfort and soothe her. I couldn't help laughing to myself. After today, there likely won't be any place left for me, Clara Vance, in the Vance family. Father, mother, I've already arranged a marriage in the foreign concession. I'm leaving today. Watching their affected, pathetic display, I finally decided I wouldn't stay in this family any longer. Before they could react, I bowed and knocked my head 3 times. My movements were crisp and decisive. For raising me, I thank you both today, once and for all. As soon as I finished, I turned and walked away. Stop. Julian's voice suddenly rang out. He was surprised by my reaction. He hadn't even finished talking to Evelyn when he hurried over to stop me. His eyes held mockery and confusion I couldn't read. Clara, don't think you can act all high and mighty and play hard to get with me, just to make yourself feel special. I raised my hand and swung at his face. Brother-in-law, show some respect. The sharp crack silenced the entire room. Julian was stunned by the slap. He stared at me, dazed. I didn't spare him another glance. While he stood there stunned, I shoved open the door and hurried into North Capital's alleys. The noise behind me slowly faded. I walked on into the wind. The pain of the slap still lingered in my palm. Vance family, Julian, Evelyn, this isn't over. But as for me, Clara, whatever storms lie ahead, they're better than being trapped in that mire, at their mercy. Julian and Evelyn's engagement went ahead despite the scandal. The news spread through every street in North Capital. I clutched the little money I had. After a long, winding journey, I hid in a private clinic outside the foreign concession. I'd stumbled across this place in my previous life. It was secluded and quiet, perfect for evading the Vance family's search. On my first day there, I hired a few errand runners to spread word through North Capital's tea houses and restaurants. This story was one I'd carefully made up. On the day the fighting broke out, Evelyn entered the ruins alone using Western surgery and miracle drugs to drag Julian back from death's door. I added a few details, casting Evelyn as a wartime miracle doctor skilled in Eastern and Western medicine. Within days, the story spread. I heard from one of the runners that Evelyn initially acted humble, but soon the powerful invited her to banquets every day. The expensive gifts piled up like a mountain. She grew more and more carried away. Even Julian's warnings to rein it in went in one ear and out the other. The runner said Julian had noticed something was off too. He had people quietly investigate Evelyn's medical background, but in the end, out of guilt and that ridiculous affection, he chose to look the other way. I sat by the clinic window, my fingertips tracing the pattern on the medicine chest. My eyes were ice cold. Evelyn Vance's reputation as a miracle doctor quickly spread through North Capital's elite circles. I stayed in my little clinic in the foreign concession, hearing daily reports that Evelyn had completely lost herself, spending every day at high society banquets. She took rich men's wives' pulses and prescribed Western medicine to warlords' families. The gold and jewels she collected filled half a room. Those prescriptions were just a few foreign phrases she'd memorized by rote, yet everyone still clamored for her attention. I had no time for her little charade. I saw patients and saved lives every day, using my family's traditional medicine to relieve the suffering of countless poor people. Grateful for what I'd done, they were all willing to help. I kept a close eye on Evelyn's every move, where she learned about her patients' conditions, and where she hid the scripts she'd memorized. I gathered every piece of evidence in a box. One day, an aide hurried in with a report. Evelyn had just gotten 2 treasures from a banquet. A diamond necklace from a foreign earl, worth a fortune. My hand paused for the slightest moment as I treated my patient, then steadied. I rolled the silver needle between my fingers, a chill flashing through my eyes. The more she reveled in hollow fame and riches, the harder it would be for her to turn back. That night, darkness lay thick as ink. The alley outside the concession was silent but for insects. I locked the clinic door, and had only taken a few steps when I heard hurried footsteps mixed with angry shouts. Then, a dark figure staggered into the depths of the alley and crashed hard onto the ground. Soldiers from the northern warlords came after him. They cursed and searched for a while, but found no one. Cursing, they finally left. I approached with my lantern and saw the man had been shot in the abdomen. Blood had soaked through his uniform. He was already unconscious. On the torn uniform fabric, I could just make out the Revolutionary Army's insignia. My fingertips trembled slightly. The memory of saving Julian Sterling in my past life came rushing back. It was just as chaotic then, and he was covered in blood, too. But that time, I saved an ungrateful wretch. I hesitated for only a moment. Then a doctor's instinct overruled every concern. I crouched down and checked his breathing. He still had a faint pulse of life. I couldn't afford to rest. Gritting my teeth, I half-dragged, half-carried him up. Using the cover of night, I staggered back to the clinic with him. The back room was hidden and quiet. I'd kept it for storing medicinal herbs. I laid him on a crude wooden bed. His face was pale, and blood kept seeping from his wounds. My expression didn't change. I saved him because it was my nature. Who he was or why he was being hunted was none of my concern. I left the man in the back room and went to get my medical kit. The gunshot wound in his abdomen went to the bone. Severe blood loss had left him paper white. I picked up a silver needle and used my family's technique to seal several vital acupoints and stop the bleeding. Then I cleaned the wound with strong liquor and applied crushed healing powder. When I was done, I stayed by his side and gave him a bowl of restorative herbs every 2 hours. For 3 days and 3 nights, the man remained unconscious. While changing his bandages, I accidentally touched something hard inside his coat. It turned out to be a silver pocket watch. Its case bore an intricate vine pattern. The chain was long and slender. It clearly wasn't an ordinary watch. I didn't think much of it. I put the watch back where I'd found it. On the 3rd night, the man finally woke up. The instant he opened his eyes, a flash of wariness crossed his eyes. His hand quickly went to his waist, but found nothing there. Only then did he relax. "Thank you for saving me, miss." His voice was hoarse, but carried a steady authority. I gave a slight nod and handed him a bowl of warm rice porridge. After he finished, he took the pocket watch from his coat and set it on the table. "Take this watch as a token of my gratitude. If you ever find yourself in trouble, use it to find me." I didn't hesitate. I reached out and took it. He said no more. When he rose, his steps were still unsteady. Before he left, he took half a case of common wound medicine from the clinic. Night had grown thick. His figure soon vanished at the alley's end. I held the pocket watch, my fingertips brushing its cold metal casing. In my ear, I could almost still hear its steady, measured ticking. Saving him was simply a doctor's duty. Who he was, where he was going, none of it concerned me. North Capital newspapers from the past few days lay piled on the clinic windowsill. I ran my fingers along the paper's edge. My eyes scanned every military and political report, but I never saw that familiar name. In my previous life, this commander was hunted down for turning Julian Sterling's men against him. Julian ordered the manhunt. Badly wounded, the commander later died. Yet North Capital was calm and peaceful, as if this man had never existed. My fingers tightened slightly. I realized being reborn may have changed the course of events. The revelation weighed heavily on me. Evelyn's scam was exposed because of evidence from this commander's former subordinate. Now the trail had gone cold. Would Evelyn keep posing as a miracle doctor and live happily ever after? I rose and went to the medicine chest. My fingers brushed the pocket watch's strange engraving. The metal's chill spread through my fingertips. I couldn't accept it. Why should Evelyn claim credit for saving me and enjoy wealth by trampling over my grave? Why should Julian Sterling, that ungrateful wretch, side with the impostor without a care? I turned and locked the clinic door. I put away the medicine chest, banknotes, and pocket watch. Outside, the wind whipped up dust and sent it toward North Capitol. Since the story has changed, I'll set it right with my own hands. North Capitol, it's time I went back. Those who owe me will pay it all back, little by little, with interest. North Capitol's night sky glowed beneath the lights of the garrison mansion. I changed into a waiter's blue cotton uniform and carried a tray through the glittering guests. Julian Sterling had thrown the party to promote Evelyn, and to restore the Marquis family's honor. The elite dinner was lavish beyond measure. Warlords, tycoons, and renowned doctors all gathered. Everyone was praising Miracle Dr. Vance. I kept my eyes lowered as I handed champagne to the guests, but scanned the room from the corner of my eye. Evelyn wore a Western-style evening gown, surrounded by admirers. Her face was glowing with pride. I tightened my grip on the tray until my fingertips turned white. I was only waiting for the right moment to tear his false facade to pieces. Suddenly, a large hand seized my wrist. The grip was so strong it nearly crushed my bones. I looked up into Julian's icy eyes. He stared at me, his eyes filled with shock and suspicion. Then undisguised fury took over. Clara, you have some nerve. He gave me no chance to explain. He yanked me by the wrist, ignoring the guest stares, and dragged me to a secluded corner outside the ballroom. I stumbled after him. My face remained expressionless, but a cold tide churned inside me, so he'd recognized me. Good. Now I wouldn't have to find another opening. I looked at his tense profile, my eyes utterly indifferent. A chill wind swept through the secluded corner. Julian finally released my wrist. His grip had been so tight it left red marks around my wrist. He stared at me, his expression complicated. The anger from moments ago was gone. In its place was a calculated gentleness. Clara, I know I've wronged you. His voice was low with deliberately soothing undertones. Evelyn's naive by nature. She can't handle those difficult cases. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. When he saw I wasn't arguing, his tone grew more earnest. Stay and manage her medical cases. I'll guarantee you wealth and luxury. I'll make you my concubine someday. You'll live in splendor, a better fate than wandering outside. His words were like a poisonous thorn driven deep into my heart. In my past life, his lies fooled me and left me locked away to burn alive in a fire. The scorching pain came flooding back. I couldn't stop myself from trembling. My nails dug deep into my palms. Hatred surged through me, nearly breaking through my self-control. But I knew it wasn't time yet. I slowly raised my eyes, feigning just the right amount of hesitation, as if weighing the pros and cons of his offer. Seeing this, Julian thought I was wavering. His face took on a look of triumph. What he didn't know was that I was only watching him, watching that hypocritical face and seeing how many laughable bargaining chips he'd used to pave the way to ruin for him and Evelyn. I was pretending to humor Julian when I heard hurried footsteps. Evelyn came rushing over in her high heels. A fake smile plastered across her face. She grabbed my arm with nauseatingly sweet affection. Clara, I knew you'd be here. I've been worried about you all this time. Stay by my side. Just help me with a few little chores. Her fingertips were icy cold, with a barely perceptible pressure. Clearly, she was afraid I'd ruin her plans. I lowered my lashes and let a trace of emotion show, as if her sisterly devotion had truly moved me. Before Julian could say a word, I suddenly furrowed my brow and gently clutched my left wrist. My voice carried a hint of restrained pain. How thoughtful of you, sis. But this hand was injured saving you back then. It hurts terribly whenever I do hard work, let alone handle blood-soaked herbs. At those words, Julian's face instantly darkened. He turned to Evelyn, his eyes full of displeasure. Evelyn, you knew her hand was injured. And you still asked her to handle chores. Were you deliberately making things hard for her? Evelyn went pale. She hurriedly waved her hands, trying to explain, but was too frantic to form a complete sentence. I stood to the side, watching her flail in helpless panic. A cold smile flickered in my eyes. Watching Julian Sterling's evasive eyes, I understood at once. This feast was really a trap. Madame Sterling and those power brokers had long doubted Evelyn's medical skills and set this trap to test her. I lowered my eyes, lightly tracing the red mark around my wrist. My voice was utterly calm. As for the young commander's proposal, I'm afraid I can't accept. Julian's expression darkened just as he was about to pressure me. I looked up at him and added, unhurriedly, young commander, if you believe Miss Vance is a miracle doctor, why ask someone afraid of blood and ignorant of medicine to help? Unless you also doubt Miss Vance's skills? Those words struck like a dagger straight at Julian's weak spot, his face flushed bright red. His lips moved, but not a word came out. I had exposed his hidden doubts in public, leaving him utterly humiliated. The air seemed to freeze. He stood rooted to the spot, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with shame. I stood nearby, calm and expressionless. In my past life, he believed the lies and sent me straight to hell. In this life, one mild question was enough to humiliate him like this. This was only the beginning. There was plenty more to come. When Evelyn saw I wouldn't budge, her fake smile shattered. She grabbed me by the wrist and dragged me to a secluded corridor. Clara Vance, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. She moved in close and lowered her voice, but it was laced with menace. So what if you saved Julian back then? As an adopted orphan, being his concubine is already more than you deserve. Her grip on my wrist made it ache, but I only stared at her coldly. There wasn't a ripple in my eyes. If you know what's good for you, you'll quietly clean up my messes. She ground out through clenched teeth. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll make sure everyone in North Capital knows your identity, and you'll have nowhere to go. Her threat was cheap and laughable. Just then, I heard Julian approaching. Frowning, he strode over and shoved Evelyn aside. Enough. Go home. Evelyn glared at me, then looked at Julian. His face was grim, so she didn't dare make another scene. She stamped her foot and stormed off. Julian and I were alone in the hall. He looked at me, his voice softening as he tried to persuade me again. I lowered my eyes, lightly tracing my palm. Inside, I felt nothing. Their little games were utterly boring. Evelyn finally left. Julian and I were alone in the hall. After a long silence, he swallowed his pride, his voice almost pleading. Clara, I'm sorry. You really were the one who saved me. I lowered my eyes and traced my calloused palm in silence. But I'm already engaged to Evelyn. What's done is done. He took a deep breath and tried to convince me. For your sister's sake, help her through this. Once this blows over, I'll tell mother and make you my equal wife. I'll treat you well for life. Equal wife? I finally looked up at him, my eyes full of scorn. This man. Moments ago, he'd offered me a concubine's place. Now that I wouldn't budge, he dangled equal wife before me. All he'd ever cared about was never gratitude, only saving face. I spoke slowly, my voice quiet, but every word was clear. Young Commander, if you adore Miss Vance so much that you can forgive her premarital pregnancy, why ask an adopted orphan like me for help? At those words, Julian's face instantly went pale. He suddenly froze. Shock and panic filled his eyes, like he'd been publicly exposed. I watched him like this without feeling a thing. He thought he could hide all his dirty deeds. He was only fooling himself. Julian was about to say more when hurried footsteps approached. Madam Sterling's maid rushed over, looking frantic. Young Commander, there's trouble in the front hall. Madam Sterling needs you there now. Julian frowned deeply and shot me a vicious glare. His voice held a note of resentment. Think carefully about my offer. You'd better know what's good for you. With that, he hurried off after the maid. I stood where I was, my fingertips cold and a steely glint in my eyes. The show was finally beginning. I slowly returned to the ballroom. A crowd had gathered in the center, their whispers filling the room. A lavishly dressed warlord's wife clutched her stomach, deathly pale. She curled up in pain in her chair and vomited non-stop. Everyone turned to Evelyn, expectation in their voices. Miracle Dr. Vance, save her. Surrounded by the crowd, Evelyn went deathly pale, her hands trembling. She knew nothing about medicine. She could only bluff and bark out orders. Give her warm water, now. And bring me some Western painkillers. Those painkillers were extremely potent. You couldn't just use them in an emergency. This is madness. A sharp female voice cried. The commander's daughter rushed forward and stopped the servant. Using potent drugs without a diagnosis, are you trying to treat her or kill her? Evelyn's face flushed bright red. She stammered, unable to offer a single defense. I stood in a corner, watching coldly, the faintest smile curling my lips. Before the commander's daughter's rebuke had ended, another clear female voice rang out from the crowd. It was the education minister's daughter speaking. A well-known Western doctor in North Capital. She pushed through the crowd. Her sharp gaze swept over Evelyn, her voice thick with undisguised contempt. Miss Vance doesn't even understand basic emergency care. Her so-called Western medicine is nothing but memorized jargon to fool these powerful people who know nothing about medicine. Her words hit the mark. Evelyn's face turned a deep purple red. Humiliated and furious, she pointed at the minister's daughter and screamed, "You're talking nonsense. Come prove it. Treat this lady, and let's see who the real miracle doctor is." The crowd erupted. They cheered her on. Just then, an old man with white hair and beard stepped forward. He was a retired professor of traditional medicine from North Capital Union Hospital, and her distant uncle. Stroking his beard, he said calmly, "I'll take you on." Watching the old man remain so composed, Evelyn panicked. What did he know about medicine? He couldn't even identify an illness, much less treat one. In her panic, her eyes suddenly landed on me in the corner, as if she'd found a lifeline. She pointed at me, her voice shrill, yet deliberately calm. "I won't have to do this myself. This is my apprentice, Clara Vance." Her medical skills are inferior to mine, but good enough for this. Let her compete in my place. Every eye in the room turned to me. I stood in the shadows. My fingertips felt cold. A cold smile flickered in my eyes. Evelyn dragged me beneath the corridor. The cruelty in her eyes was clear. Her voice dropped low. Clara, you have to win this contest. Win, and I'll guarantee you a life of luxury. But if you lose, I'll drag you to hell with me. She was certain I wouldn't fight back, certain I still clung to our laughable sisterly bond. I looked up at her. My eyes were utterly indifferent. She wasn't worth the effort of a reaction. When I stayed silent, she assumed I was afraid. She lifted her chin smugly and dragged me back to the center of the party. The old doctor fixed his sharp gaze on me and got straight to the point. I have already examined this lady's pulse. Tell us her diagnosis, treatment, and prescription. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward me. I slowly approached the warlord's wife. I placed my fingertips on her wrist. After only a moment, I pulled my hand away. The illness stems from cold evil stagnating in the middle burner, caused by blocked qi in the spleen and stomach. My voice rang out clearly. The treatment must first warm the middle and dispel the cold, then regulate qi and relieve the pain. Use a modified Liangfu herbal pill combined with Muxiang qi regulating powder. Use generous amounts of galangal and cyperus rhizome, supplemented with dried tangerine peel and amomum. These traditional medicine terms were difficult to understand. The powerful guests exchanged confused looks. Even the education minister's daughter looked completely lost. Evelyn understood none of it, but still tried to maintain her dignity. A fake smile curled at her lips. I lowered my eyes, my fingertips cold. Good, their confusion was exactly what I wanted. The moment I finished speaking, Evelyn eagerly squeezed in beside me, and linked her arm through mine. Her face was full of smug pride. Everyone, Clara learned all her medical skills from me. I only wanted to give her some experience, so I had her represent me in this contest. At her words, before anyone could agree, the old doctor stroked his beard and said gravely, "Young lady, you're mistaken. Everything Miss Vance just said was rooted in profound Chinese medicine. Though obscure, it was completely accurate. Her medical expertise far surpasses mine. No one could have taught her that." Evelyn's smile froze. Her face instantly turned ghostly pale. I slowly pulled my hand back and swept my gaze across the room. My voice was calm, but every word rang clear. I was never taught by Evelyn. And I know nothing about Western medicine. I'm not even the Vance family's biological daughter. I'm just the orphan they adopted. When I finished, I pulled a stack of papers from my coat, then flung them into the air. They were letters Evelyn used to gather patients' medical details, along with the notes she memorized her lines from, and her ledger of bribes. The papers scattered across the floor, revealing a shocking truth. I was the one who saved Julian during the war. Evelyn merely stole the credit. Her so-called title as a miracle doctor was nothing but an elaborate con. I stared coldly at Evelyn, without a ripple of emotion in my eyes. Now everyone sees the truth, don't they? The entire room fell silent. Then an uproar erupted. Evelyn's face went paper white. She let out a hysterical scream and raised her hand to strike me. Julian reacted in the blink of an eye and seized her wrist. Furious and frantic, he lowered his voice and snapped, "Enough. Hurry up and fake a faint. I'll get you out." Evelyn froze for a moment, then immediately started to collapse. "Hold it." The commander's daughter strode forward and blocked her path. "Whether you faint or not isn't for you to decide." Before she could finish, the director of Union Hospital she'd arranged for hurried in. He quickly took Evelyn's wrist and soon spoke in a low, grave voice. "This young lady has a slippery and rapid pulse. It's a sign she's 2 months pregnant." The moment those words left his mouth, the entire room erupted. Everyone looked at Evelyn Vance with sudden contempt. So she was desperate to marry into the Sterling family. She was pregnant. Julian Sterling's face turned ashen, and he was utterly humiliated. Amid the chaos, 2 mysterious men in black hurried over. Their movements were swift and precise. They respectfully nodded to me. "Miss Su, our master wishes to see you." I didn't resist. I let them take me away from the commotion. The carriage sped through the streets and stopped at a secluded estate. I stepped into the main hall and looked up. There stood the gravely wounded man I'd once saved. He sat in the seat of honor, watching me with a smile. I stared at the smiling man in the seat of honor. My pupils contracted slightly, filled with surprise. He was no longer the desperate wreck he'd been that day. He wore a perfectly pressed military uniform, with a calm, commanding edge in his eyes. Before I could speak, footsteps sounded outside. The director of Union Hospital hurried in and respectfully saluted the man. "General Hayes, the matter you ordered has been taken care of." General Hayes. My heart jolted. I suddenly realized the man I'd unknowingly saved was a famed commander of the Revolutionary Army in North Capital. Alexander Hayes rose and approached. In a gentle voice, he said, "Miss Su, thank you for saving my life that day." He explained without hesitation. "The northern warlords hunted me down after I took part in an operation. My abdominal gunshot wound had nearly healed, but kept reopening as I fled, so I collapsed in an alley, looking like a wreck. I froze, then didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No wonder he moved with such skill and carried himself with such distinction. He was actually such an important man. Alexander Hayes watched my stunned expression, and the smile in his eyes deepened. At the young commander's banquet, I arranged that warlord's wife's sudden illness. He spoke with complete candor. You saved my life, so I had to set things right for you and expose Evelyn Vance's scam. I lowered my gaze to the pocket watch in my palm. Its metal case gleamed with a solemn, matte sheen. So there was another hand at work in this game of revenge. I looked at Alexander Hayes and suddenly remembered the medical tools and medicines he'd taken with him. They were all family heirlooms. They meant a great deal to me. General Hayes, I said calmly. Could you return the silver needles and wound salve you took earlier? Alexander Hayes laughed at that. He immediately told the doctor behind him to return them to their rightful owner. The doctor soon brought over a wooden box. The needles and herbs inside were untouched. I took the box from him, my fingertips brushed the familiar silver needles. I looked up. General, your wounds may be healed, but you still need a follow-up exam, to make sure no toxin remains. I took out the silver needles and skillfully treated Alexander Hayes. The doctors nearby watched intently and raised several difficult TCM questions. I answered each one patiently, from pharmacology and medicinal properties to the principles of acupuncture. Every answer was precise and illuminating. The doctors nodded repeatedly, their eyes filled with admiration. Only after I finished checking his pulse did Alexander finally speak. The Northern President has heard of your medical skill. He asked Abbot Solon to read your marriage fate. He paused. I stepped in and stopped it for you, and secured your right to practice medicine freely. With fighting on the border intensifying, I'd like to invite you to join the field hospital. What do you say? Alexander looked at the needle in my hand. He spoke slowly. After I was attacked that day, I had stabilized my injuries, but the northern warlords wouldn't let up. The fighting kept reopening my wounds. If I hadn't run into you, I'd probably have died in that alley. I deftly administered the final needle. Then I put the needles away. I gave a slight nod. The toxin is gone, General. You only need to rest and recover. Then I changed the subject. I need to leave for a while, to take care of some personal matters. As soon as I finished speaking, a guard rushed in from outside with news from North Capital. My parents had relied on Julian for years, secretly embezzling military supplies. When it was exposed, Julian cut them loose. They were sentenced to hard labor on the frontier. As Alexander's military doctor, I went to visit them in prison. Seeing my parents in such a sorry state, I set $300 silver on the table. My voice was calm and flat. This settles what I owed you for raising me. I exposed their old lies, word by word. I was the Vance family's biological daughter. To curry favor with the powerful, you claimed I was an adopted orphan. I watched their faces go ashen. Then I turned and walked away. I watched the escort party disappear. When I returned to the estate, Alexander was standing in the courtyard. He looked at me. His voice was earnest. The fighting is fierce at the frontier. I'm asking you again to serve as a field doctor for the Revolutionary Army. Come with me to the frontier. When word came of Evelyn's fate, I was sorting herbs I'd just gathered, rolling a sprig of mugwort between my fingers, without even looking up. After her reputation was ruined, news of her out-of-wedlock pregnancy spread across North Capital. Julian was afraid of getting dragged into the scandal, so he cut ties with her without hesitation. The Vance family was raided. No one would take in the disgraced woman. She could only seek refuge with a minor warlord she'd cozied up to at a banquet. Later, the warlord's residence was caught in a firefight. A stray bullet set the dilapidated house ablaze. Trapped in the flames, she screamed for help. Everyone nearby either fled for their lives, or watched with cold indifference. In the end, the raging fire consumed her. When I heard the news, I felt nothing. She had chosen this path herself. Greed and hypocrisy drove her to a dead end, recreating the misery of my past life. You reap what you sow. A few days later, Julian showed up at my door, brimming with excitement. He was dressed in uniform, looking utterly confident he'd win. Clara, I'm about to lead troops to suppress the rebels. Once I earn my military honors, I'll have General Hayes play matchmaker and make you my wife. I was sorting the herbs by type, without even looking at him. I let him ramble on beside me. To me, his words were nothing but an irrelevant breeze. After Julian Sterling left in frustration, Alexander Hayes strolled in. With a knowing smile, he teased, he still won't let up. Do you really feel nothing at all? I set down my basket of herbs and looked up at him. My voice was calm, but firm. Everything in the past has turned to dust. Now, I only want to practice medicine and save lives. The fighting along the border grew worse. Gunfire and shelling never stopped outside the field hospital tents. I was busy cleaning and stitching wounds when I heard Julian Sterling had volunteered to lead troops against the rebels. He must have hoped military glory could restore his pride, then have Alexander Hayes force me to marry him. But he never expected that after one fierce battle, his forces would be utterly crushed. Julian Sterling took a bullet to the abdomen. His guards fought to carry him to the field hospital. By then, he was barely breathing. The tent was packed with critically wounded soldiers. I couldn't spare a hand. By the time I finally had a moment, his vital signs were too faint to detect. As he lay dying, Julian Sterling clutched my coat. His clouded eyes were filled with regret. He murmured about Abbot Tholan's prophecy that he wouldn't live past 25, confessing all he owed me in both lives. I looked at him, my voice calm and emotionless. A doctor treats the sick, not evil men. His hand fell limp. He drew his last breath. I turned back to the operating table and went on fighting to save lives. The setting sun streamed through the tent's gaps, falling across my blood-stained white coat. Its warmth spread all around. The hatred and shackles of the past finally turned to dust amid the gunfire and medicine chests. In this chaotic, changing world, I'll stay true to my original calling and live a life that's truly my own.